All right, hey, what is up? And welcome to Thursday's episode of Where All the Ladies At. How is everybody? So, it is Thursday. That means we are talking about historical women. And if you haven't seen Monday's episode where we cover myth, go check it out as well. This month we are focused on Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month with an emphasis on the Asian just for this time because I found some really cool people. And even though I know that this is a holiday that's really only celebrated in the U.S. or, and I don't know, it isn't now because, well, when everything's happening, but I still think it's worth it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to celebrate it no matter what anybody says and no matter what anybody's address is. They don't have a right to tell me I can't give some claps and some kudos to people from different cultures, right? So, as I said, it's Asian Pacific Islander. My cat has gone crazy. I gave her some catnip, and now she is, you know what she is. Hi there, little one. Anyways, so with that being said, that's what we're covering this week. And on Mondays, we're covering goddesses and stuff from that part of the world as well. By the way, I'm Kim. I am your host. I am a history nerd, an archaeological groupie, and a writer, and someone who has always been very passionate about history, but maybe more about females in history over the past 5 or 6 years. Have always loved history, and I thought it would be kind of cool to discuss some ladies that just don't get enough attention, and maybe there's some that you know but you don't know the whole story, and so I just thought it was time that we all get, these ladies get their moment in the spotlight. It's important. This episode we're going to be talking about Razia Sultan. She basically was a queen who challenged an empire in the 13th century India. And we'll jump into more about her in a little bit. But before we do, we're going to do a little shameless plugging and housekeeping, as I always do. So if you want to reach out to me, you can definitely do that. I have social media. I have TikTok. I have Instagram. I have Facebook. If you don't have any of those and you rock it old school, kudos to you for not being lured into the white van of social media. I have an email for you, so you can always shoot an email to me that way. If you want to support the podcast, liking, comment, sharing, following, subscribing, doing all that stuff, any type of interaction with the video or audio would be great. It tells the platform's algorithm, whether that be YouTube or Spotify, that people are interested and maybe more people would be interested. So I would greatly appreciate any of that for these podcasts. If you want to kick a little cash our way, you can do that too. I have a Buy Me a Coffee on a Patreon, and I will never turn down cash. If you wanted to know about this woman and so much more, you can check out the Medium publication that goes along with the podcast. And if you're into magical, mystical, spiritual wellness, holistic healing, all that kind of stuff, you may want to check out my other podcast. It's called Our Mystic Road Trip. And that is it for the shameless plugging and housekeeping. Now we can get talking about Razia Sultan. Alright, so she was the first and only female ruler of the Delhi Sultanate, and what a badass Razia was. But before we jump into her life and how she got to be who she was, we need to look at 13th century India, what was going on there, and what was like for women. And once again, I say this on every episode. The reason I do this is because I really, really, truly feel that if you understand the environment that the person was raised in and the challenges they had to face, it really allows you to really see how this woman got to the way she was, and also like really helps you understand and admire her and respect her just that little bit much more. So let's start. India in the 13th century. What was going on? Well, first off, let's just say India was kind of this land of really profound cultural riches and political upheaval, right? The subcontinent of this time was a mosaic of like diverse kingdoms, empires, dynasties, and every one of them was vying for power and influence, right? Typical. Southern India was pretty much dominated by the Chola and the Pandya empires, and I think I'm pronouncing this stuff right? And northern India found itself under the growing control of the Delhi Sultanate. And this was a Muslim empire that was kind of expanding across the region. The Delhi Sultanate had been established in 1206 by, I'm going to mispronounce this, Qutbuddin Aibak. And he was a former slave who rose through the ranks to seize power, right? The Sultanate really was founded in military conquest and had a profound impact on the political and social and cultural landscapes of northern India. Aibak's successor, Shams-ud-din Iltutmish, I think, further solidified the Sultanate's rule, and it really secured it as kind of this dominant force in the region. Now, under Iltutmish's rule, the Sultanate began to establish administrative and military structures that kind of would help sustain it for centuries to come. Iltutmish also introduced reforms that aimed to integrate local Indian populations into the Sultanate's governance. So this really marked the beginning of a very long period of cultural exchange between Hindu and Muslim communities. The period also witnessed the flourishing of the Mamluk Dynasty, with rulers like Iltutmish, who, though born a slave, had risen to the most powerful position in the empire, right? This marked a pretty unique moment in history where the boundaries of like social nobility seemed to kind of shift a little bit, right? But while the Sultanate was consolidating its power, the rest of India was kind of experiencing a lot of political fragmentation, right? The Rajput kingdoms, local dynasties, and Hindu rulers still held sway over a large part of the subcontinent. Regional powers clashed a lot with expanding sultanates, and this led to volatile political environments where alliances and betrayals and shifting loyalties were kind of normal. It was in this political, unstable, and highly complex environment that Razia would rise in prominence, right? India's cities were thriving during this period. Cities like Delhi, Lahore, and Multan were not only city centers of political power, but also really vibrant cultural hubs. Markets were full of exotic goods, spices, silks, and metals, traded from merchants from Persia, Central Asia, and even beyond. Art flourished during this time. Scholars, poets, intellectuals really thrived in the courts of the Delhi Sultanate. But amidst this cultural renaissance, the 13th century was also a time of really a significant tension for religious ways, right? The spread of Islam in the north led to growing friction between the Hindu and the majority and the Muslim rulers. There was occasional outbreaks of violence and resistance. In the court of Iltutmish, there was kind of a progressive shift, though, towards inclusivity, right? Hindus were not merely subjects anymore. They often had positions of power in the administration, and cultural exchange between Hindus and Muslims became a lot more frequent. And these interactions laid the foundation for an era of kind of a shared heritage, really visible in like architecture and literature and arts of the period. The multicultural environment, however, was also marked by tension and rivalry, particularly between the Turkish nobility and the indigenous Indian population, right? Iltutmish's reign came to a close. A new era in the history of Delhi was about to begin, and it was Razia Sultan, the daughter of Iltutmish, who would take up the mantle of leadership and challenge every inch of conventional norms that was left at this time, right? And that's where we're going to jump to talking about women, right? Now, because we're talking about Razia Sultan, we're going to turn our attention towards women of the 13th century India, right? Not surprisingly, women's roles were pretty circumscribed by societal norms and expectations, right? In this time, women were confined to the private sphere, right? Homes and families. They had to uphold the values of modesty, obedience, and devotion. And this was especially true in the upper classes, right? Women in the upper classes often were secluded behind the walls of their homes. Their movement and interactions with the outside world was very restricted. And one of the most pervasive practice during this period was purdah, which is basically like keeping the women out of public eye, right? The practice was prominent among the Muslim elite, and it became a symbol of women's virtue and social status. In the Hindu tradition, women's roles were similarly kind of limited. They're not always in the same ways. There was a rigid structure of the caste system, and it was deeply ingrained into patriarchy, right? So this meant women's access to education and political involvement and economic power was very, very restricted. In addition to purdah, women faced the social expectation of child marriage. This is where girls were married off at young ages, often before they even reached adolescence, which I just gonna be real with you guys. Sometimes when I'm reading this stuff, I have to really curb my modern mentality. Because when you say to me you were marrying people off at young ages, even before adolescence, in my modern mind, that is violent and gross. And it is, but I also have to not say don't judge, but understand what the world was like at that time and the expectations of the time. So sometimes it's very hard. So going back to this. So yeah, before they reached adolescence. And once married, a woman's role was then confined to wife and mother, right? So no autonomy beyond the home. Widows, in particular, had very few rights, right? Many were forced to undergo the ritual of sati, in which they were expected to immolate themselves on their husband's funeral pyre. Okay, so for those who currently just turned in, that you did hear that right. Women whose husbands died were expected to throw themselves on the funeral pyre and burn to death with their husband. This was seen as a way to maintain social order, but it definitely came at the expense of women's rights and freedoms and sometimes their lives, right? Despite these oppressive conditions, there were some women who defied the societal norms, right? Women in courts of rulers, like the Delhi Sultanate, sometimes had opportunities to wield influence. Their power was very subtle and is often behind the scenes, but some of them had it. Some women became advisors to kings. Others held considerable sway over the decisions of their male relatives. However, such women were very rare. And most had to just navigate a system where their contributions were like overlooked and dismissed, you know. Razia Sultan, however, stands as one of the most remarkable exceptions, right? And we'll talk about her in just a minute, right? But you have to understand, her presence on the throne was very controversial, you know. Especially when you look at the male-dominated Turkish nobility, right? And they held most of the power in the Sultanate. So yeah, that's what it was kind of like for women. Not great would be an understatement. So now we can talk about Razia Sultan. We can talk about her life, her rise to power, and her reign. So, Razia Sultan was born in 1205 in Badaun, India, to Sultan Shams-ud-din Iltutmish. We'll just call him Iltutmish from now on. The ruler of the Delhi Sultanate. She was raised in the royal court, So she was very smart, she was very well educated, and really skilled in governance and military strategy. You know, unlike other women of her time, she was not confined to the domestic sphere, but was really involved in state affairs. Her father, at a very early age, recognized that she had exceptional capabilities. So he chose her over his sons to succeed him on the throne. That was very, very controversial. In an era where power was almost exclusively passed down to male heirs, Iltutmish's decision to appoint his daughter as the heir was very, very revolutionary. Now, he divided deeply entrenched patriarchy and broke with centuries of tradition by choosing her. And this really set the stage for quite a dramatic and tumultuous rise to power for her. Iltutmish died in 1236, and then, as per his request, Razia ascended the throne of the Delhi Sultanate, and her reign only lasted 4 years. And it was really fraught with a lot of challenges, right? She was emperor from 1236 to 1240. She was pretty clever. She possessed like political acumen and military expertise, but there was a lot of resistance from the nobility. The Turkish aristocracy, as I said, they were really accustomed to male rulers, and they resented the idea that a woman was on the throne. And of course, it wasn't only due to the fact she was a girl, but like the leadership style that she had, it defied norms as well, right? Razia's reign was marked by several confrontations with the nobles. They felt threatened by her unorthodox approach to governance. You know, her close relationship with Jamal-ud-din Yakut. This was an Abyssinian slave turned military commander. Abyssinian, yeah. And that kind of fueled more resentment, right? So in other words, she had a relationship with a slave that turned military commander. Oh my God, that's shocking. You know, and the other nobles kind of viewed her rise to power and his rise to power, because by being involved with the person on the throne he was raised, they really, really felt challenged. They really felt that their dominance was being challenged. Sorry guys, I just saw the cutest thing ever. My cat is like laying here. She's you know, she's had her catnip. She's now thoroughly stoned and happy. And she's just chilling. She's very cute. Anyway, so because of his that threat to their dominance, they started to become very discontent, right? And then guess what happens? Conspiracies and plots begin to run amok, right? But even with all this stuff going on, Razia still kind of remained determined to govern. She really wanted to implement some very important administrative reforms, you know. During her reign, she sought to solidify the Sultanate's power through military and infrastructural advancements. She was really committed to the welfare of her people. She built roads and gardens and public buildings. She wanted economic growth. She boosted trade and integrated the Hindu population into the administration. That was pretty groundbreaking, especially during that divided part of time. Her policies helped build a more prosperous and interconnected empire. And her approach to governance was seen as forward-thinking, right? Especially when she started to include women and marginalized community in public life. Despite these accomplishments, though, her reign was very short, as I said. In 1240, after a series of military defeats and rebellion led by her own nobles, Razia was deposed. The political unrest of the time had culminated in her capture. She was imprisoned, and eventually she died under mysterious circumstances, we'll say. And even though she only had 4 years on the throne, she still left a mark on the history of India. She was not just a ruler. She proved that even in overwhelming opposition, a woman could lead and do it well. She led with strength and compassion and intelligence, And it was a groundbreaking moment in history. And it ended in tragedy, yes, but her story can still inspire generations and has still inspired generations to come. You know, her legacy really endured, she proved unequivocally, like I said, that she could do it. She didn't just rule the Delhi Sultanate. It was like, basically, it's a way, she really showed every woman that this was possible. Despite a lot of resistance, she created a pivotal moment in Indian history. Razia Sultan's story is a symbol of defiance against patriarchal structures, and she was the one who could not occupy positions of power, but also effectively do it, right? She paved the way for future generations, and I think in the end, if we look at that, that's amazing. But if we look at, like, how she impacted the world, what I would say is that, a huge part of it came in India, but it stretched so far beyond, right? I would say, in particular, her legacy really resonated strongly in the Muslim majority regions, where women were often kind of confined to domestic roles, and where the idea of women ruling a powerful empire was, like, unfathomable. Her leadership became a symbol of what women could achieve, not only in politics, but in broader sense, too. After her death, Razia's story inspired women to break free from chains of tradition and forge their own paths. In the modern era, Razia Sultan remains a pretty iconic figure for women's rights and empowerment across cultures. Her story has been celebrated as symbols of resistance and patriarchal norms, and testament to the resilience of women. In countries where women still fight for the rights to leadership and governance, Razia Sultan's story really serves as a powerful example of a possibility. And that's it. That's Razia Sultan. Her story was one of resilience and defiance and leadership. She really had a brief moment of brilliance in the empire, and but it had a huge ripple effect that continues to inspire today. She is definitely a reminder that barriers, no matter if it's cultural, social, or gender, can really be overcame. And that's it, guys. That's it for this week. That's it for Razia Sultan. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you go check out more about her. Every time I do one of these, I think, man, this would make a badass movie. And maybe someday that's what I'll do. But I am going to start writing books about these women, because I do think there's more that we could tell about them. And I don't know if I'm going to do it in a fiction style or a nonfiction style. I'm playing with that right now. But yeah, all these women deserve a book or a movie or a story about them. Anyways, that's it. As always, if you want to reach out to me, you can do that through social media or the email. If you want to support the podcast, like, comment, share, follow, subscribe, do all that good stuff, please. And thank you. If you want to kick cash my way, you can do that too. And if you want to know about this and so much more, check out the Medium publication. And if you're into magical, mystical, spiritual stuff, check out my other podcast called Our Mystic Road Trip. Until next time, guys, stay curious, stay blessed, stay safe.